There are more items that impact your page layout, so I'm going to go to the Page Layout tab. And we've worked with margins, different options here that are built in, and then you can create your custom margin. And one thing I want you to notice, the current custom margin is a 0.63 at the top, so that's from here to here. The bottom left and the right are all at 0.33. Well, the reason I point that out is because as we start going through other pieces like orientation, where those numbers end up, meaning the left, right, top, bottom differences, the different sizes of distance between the edge of the page to the content, will change based on orientation. So for example, as I go into orientation, we're defaulting here to portrait. And what that usually means is that the long edge of the page is going from bottom to top or top to bottom, versus landscape where it's usually from left to right, a horizon style. Okay, so as I look at this document, I've got those margins all the way around. But if I change it to the orientation to landscape, there you go. I click on that. It's giving me a lot more room here obviously from left to right. We do that a lot in spreadsheets to get things that are from left to right, but this gives it a very different look. Now, you need to remember that if you're going to print this, now if it's 3-hole punch or wire bound as it goes through here is going to have this area to work with, and this document is going to really be heavy left to right because the orientation is landscape. Okay. Now, the other thing to notice about this is I'm going to go back into margins, custom margins. The numbers didn't change, but they did change where they're impacting. Originally, on a portrait, it was at the top, so top to the first part of the content, but now it's on the left, so it's giving more room from the left side to the content. Okay, so if you change margins and then, or they're not the same all the way around, and then you change the orientation, you want to check your margins again to make sure that it's applying, to the area that you want it to. So I'm just going to click OK. Oh, here's a good thing to know. One or more margins are set outside the printable area of the page. Choose the Fix button to increase the appropriate margin. So what this means is the printer that I have that's attached to this is not able to print something within these margins. So I'm going to hit Fix, and it was my right margin and my bottom margin. It needed a little bit more space there. So I'm going to click OK. All right. Now, that's orientation. That's going from landscape or portrait to landscape. I'm going to go back to portrait. There we go. I've got all those pieces. They look nice and clean. Okay, good. Now I'm going to go to size. Now the size is depending on what country version that you load up. This is a US version, so it has an 8.5 by 11 for the letter, and the tabloid 11 by 17, legal 8.5 by 14, and executive. So these were all typical US sizes. However, a lot of documents that I work with will be printed in the UK. So they use a lot of A4 and A3 sizes. So you want to think about the size of the document as it's going to be printed by the people that are going to be using it. Now, you can't always catch everybody, and they can certainly print it on their own size of paper as they want to, as their printer allows them to. But you might want to think that through. So if you're developing a lot for part of the country or the world that uses A4, then you want to go ahead and use that as you build it. Now, 8.5 goes down to 8.27 by 11. It goes up to 11.69. So it's a taller paper, but it's not as wide. So let's see if we get much pushback there. A little bit, and if I go to margins, okay, the 6.3 is still at the top, and it's still okay with the others that we had before, so it's all right. So it's allowing it to stay within those margins, and it looks okay. You may, if you don't have an image that's anchored to a particular item, you may want to move it to adjust it to make sure it's right where you want it. Okay, so that looks good. So that's sizes, and you can get into envelopes, different sizes, and if you go to, let me do that one more time, I didn't mention it. Down at the bottom there's more paper sizes, and here's the drop down list. You can even do a custom size, and you put in the size paper that you want it to work with. Okay, so lots of options here apply to the whole document, which is typical, but you can also do it at different points within your document. The time I've seen that done is where a part of the document was printed on a certain size paper, and then it switches to another one. Now you got to make sure that your printer can do this, but it switches it because while it's all being printed out of one file, parts of it are being printed differently, separated, and then put into some other binder or document. Okay, so just typically stay with one size, and that makes it nice and easy. There we go. So I'm just going to hit cancel. All right, the other thing we were going to look at is breaks here. Okay, these other items we'll do in other sessions, but when you work with breaks, typically you're working with page breaks, meaning mark the point at which one page ends and the next page begins. So if I get down here and I'm starting to put a little bit more room into the document, I may want to insert a page break just to make sure that part of this doesn't get too crammed up on the first page. I may want to, separate these a little bit so they have more room to work with. I might even bring this down. We'll take the bullet point off of that. There we go. And I just want to make sure everything is spaced right, but I don't want to crutch it or, keep it, part of it on one page and one on the other. So one way to do that is you can just click in the document where you want to make sure that there is a page break. So I'm on Page Layout tab, Page Setup, and I've got breaks. So I hit the down arrow, and I'll choose Page. There we go. Now that's making sure that this goes to the next page. I'm going to delete that extra space, and it finishes off on the page just fine. Now, how do you know that you have a page break there? Because you can't see it. Well, it's actually right here. But how do you see that? Well, let's go to the Home tab, Paragraphs section, the group there, and right up here the paragraph mark is a Show Hide button. So I click on that, and now you can see your page break is listed there. So as you type things in, that page break will go down, and if it goes to the next page, it will make sure that this is on the following page. So just be aware if you put them in and you add more to it, it may create a blank page where you don't want them, so be careful with that.